Lando Norris just exploded with anger after finding out that the Las Vegas result he believed he had secured was wiped out hours after the race. A microscopic floor measurement beneath his car triggered a devastating decision that destroyed his championship momentum and shook the entire paddock. You are about to hear how this single technical failure not only cost Norris everything he fought for but placed Max Verstappen in the strongest position he has had all season. Stay right here because this twist is powerful enough to rewrite the fight for the 2025 World Championship. The moment the officials completed their post-race inspection in Las Vegas, the atmosphere shifted instantly because the data taken beneath the McLaren floors revealed measurements that left no doubt about the outcome. The skid blocks on both cars showed values below the 9mm minimum required by the regulations, and that discovery carried consequences far more severe than anything that happened on track. What felt like a secure second place for Lando Norris and a valuable set of points for Oscar Piastri evaporated the moment the readings were confirmed. This was not a penalty born of contact or unsafe driving. It was the direct result of numbers that could not be argued. As the stewards delivered their findings to McLaren, the seriousness of the situation became clear. The measurements had been repeated using certified equipment accurate to incredibly fine tolerances, and every reading remained consistent with the initial inspection. These measurements matter because the floor plays a central role in the performance of a ground effect car, and the regulation protecting its minimum thickness is absolute. Once the values fell under 9mm, the officials had no space to consider context or intention. The rulebook transformed those readings into a mandatory disqualification before McLaren could present any defense. News of the violation traveled rapidly through the paddock because disqualifying both cars of a single team is one of the rarest outcomes in the modern era of Formula One. With each passing minute, journalists recalculated standings and engineers from rival teams tried to understand how a car performing at the front of the field could fall into such a technical breach. Norris believed his second-place finish had strengthened his lead in the World Championship. Piastri believed his fourth place preserved his chances. But both achievements were undone by the same microscopic detail hidden beneath the chassis. The timing of the ruling intensified the shock because the announcement arrived long after most teams had begun packing their equipment. The checkered flag had waved hours earlier and drivers had already completed interviews and media obligations. When the officials finally released the official document confirming the disqualification, the paddock fell into a state of disbelief. It is one thing to lose a race through strategy or mechanical failure. It is another to lose it through a late-night technical discovery that overturns everything achieved on track. That is the brutal reality of a sport built on precision. The decision struck directly at the championship storyline because the points removed from Norris were not just numbers. They were the foundation of his title defense. Instead of extending his lead to more than 40 points, he watched it collapse to 24. Meanwhile, Verstappen and Piastri moved level behind him without earning anything extra on track. The entire dynamic of the title fight changed in a matter of minutes because the regulation does not allow leniency once a technical breach is recorded. This ruling transformed Las Vegas into a turning point that would carry consequences far beyond the night itself. As teams left the circuit, the new tension surrounding the championship became impossible to ignore. Norris felt frustrated and let down because the mistake that cost him so many points did not come from his driving. Piastri was left with mixed emotions as he lost critical points yet remained mathematically alive in the battle. Verstappen discovered that a title thought to be slipping away had suddenly returned to reach. The championship is now shaped not by overtakes or wheel-to-wheel fights but by the unforgiving precision of the technical regulations in Las Vegas. The technical foundation of the disqualification begins with the behavior of ground effect cars, which depend entirely on consistent airflow moving beneath the floor. When the car's ride height drops lower than expected, that airflow becomes unstable and the skid block is driven into the asphalt with far greater force. McLaren explained that during the Las Vegas event both cars experienced stronger than predicted vertical oscillations known as porpoising. This repeated upward and downward movement caused the plank to hit the surface more often at high speed, accelerating the erosion of the skid block beyond the limits that the regulations allow. The weekend's lack of clean practice running amplified this problem because McLaren did not have enough laps at representative speed to measure how aggressively the car would compress through the long straights of Las Vegas. The early sessions were disrupted by rain and lengthy stoppages caused by circuit issues, and these interruptions prevented the engineers from validating their simulation data. Normally, teams combine model predictions with long-run telemetry to set safe ride heights. Without that confirmation, the margin for error shrank considerably and left the car more vulnerable to excessive plank wear during the race. McLaren also suggested that secondary disturbances from race contact may have contributed to the excessive wear. Oscar Piastri suffered damage from an early collision that forced him to pit with a destroyed tire. Although the visible problems were restricted to the wheel, the force of the impact could have transmitted into the lower structure and changed how the floor behaved under high load. Even a subtle variation in stiffness can alter the amount of compression the plank experiences over a long run. The officials accepted this explanation as plausible but emphasized that accidental damage does not reduce regulatory responsibility. A car must comply with the rules at all times regardless of circumstances. The characteristics of the Las Vegas circuit then played a decisive role. The layout features several long straights where the car reaches full speed for extended periods, and this increases aerodynamic load dramatically. When the load remains high, the suspension compresses consistently and the skid block stays closer to the tarmac. This effect became even more severe because tire degradation was significantly lower than expected, which allowed both McLaren drivers to sustain high pace without the usual management required in long races. With fewer tire-saving laps and more sustained speed, the plank experienced more pressure and wore down faster. The officials reviewed all of McLaren's technical statements but followed the precise steps outlined in the directive that governs floor inspections. They performed repeated measurements using certified tools with tolerances far smaller than the scale of the violation and repeated those measurements in the presence of additional McLaren representatives. Every reading remained identical. The consistent values showed that the skid blocks did not meet the minimum 9mm requirement. Because earlier cases during the season had resulted in identical penalties for similar wear, the officials were required to apply the same standard to McLaren in order to maintain sporting fairness. The final conclusion was unavoidable. The combination of unexpected porpoising, limited data from disrupted practice sessions, higher aerodynamic load along the straights, and potential disturbances during the race created a situation where the skid blocks on both McLarens were below the legal threshold. Modern Formula One operates within microscopic tolerances, and when the floor runs too low even by fractions of a millimeter, the regulations treat it as a clear performance-related breach. Once the measurements were confirmed, the officials had no alternative but to disqualify both cars. This technical misjudgment became the key moment that reshaped the entire championship. In moments like this, the championship forces every viewer to consider the weight of precision in modern Formula One. A world-class driver can deliver an exceptional performance, execute every lap with discipline, and still lose everything because a component beneath the car has worn by less than 1mm. This is the part of the sport that reminds us that engineering and human performance share equal responsibility in shaping history. As you watch this battle unfold, ask yourself how much trust you would place in a setup that must remain within microscopic margins on a circuit as demanding as Las Vegas. Think about the intensity inside a team garage when engineers must decide whether to run the car lower for performance or leave a margin of safety that could protect the result from technical failure. It is a strategic dilemma that does not involve overtakes or racecraft, yet it can define championships. The disqualification in Las Vegas showed how quickly a season can be rewritten when the technical limit is approached too closely. If you were the one making that decision under pressure, would you prioritize speed or certainty? These final rounds of the season will push every team into uncomfortable territory where risk must be balanced against survival. McLaren believed their ride height predictions were safe, yet disruptions in practice created blind spots that followed them into the race. The result exposed the thin line between innovation and overreach. As you follow the closing stages of the championship, consider how you would navigate that line if the outcome of a world title depended on your judgment. The psychological impact on the drivers cannot be ignored. Norris must now carry the knowledge that a detail he did not control erased his race and reduced his lead to a vulnerable margin. Piastri must race with the awareness that any error by the team could eliminate his opportunity once again. Verstappen approaches the situation with renewed confidence because he knows the door has reopened. If you were in their position, which mindset would you choose to confront the final two races, caution or aggression? As the pressure intensifies, the decisions made in the garage will become as significant as the ones made behind the wheel. Ride heights, tire pressures, aerodynamic balance, and floor stiffness will all define the next chapter of this title fight. A single miscalibration can punish a team more harshly than any mistake made on track. Ask yourself whether you would risk running the car aggressively to chase performance or step back and preserve the points needed for the championship. In this stage of the season, every viewer becomes part of the strategic debate, and that is the purpose of this moment. The disqualification has forced everyone to rethink what matters most in the final rounds. The question is simple yet powerful. If you were responsible for protecting a world title, would you dare push the limits of the car again knowing what happened in Las Vegas, or would you pull back and secure the points with caution?